This story is about a hero who was playing a game and then fell into it in a strange way. Why me? And is this world real? Or just a game? And how do I return to my world again? But I must survive first. But this will not be easy in a hell like this. The guy, crossing his arms over his chest, asked people if they knew the place where they ended up, answering that his name was Carl and he was a mercenary. The man, lost in thought, said that his name was Riley. He was a carpenter from Adola and knew nothing about where they were. Frightened, almost crying, the guy closed his eyes and answered that his name was Grisha, and he had his own stall in Halcia, and he did not know how he ended up. A girl named Jenna looked away with incomprehension, answering that she lived deep in the forest, and as it turned out, she did not know here at all. With a confident face, one of the guys answered that his name was Han, and he was a farmer, and also added that he also did not remember anything. Throughout the territory, there were voices of people who talked to each other about how this was a dream and they did not remember or know anything. The three guys looked at each other with displeasure, listening to one answer that some magician teleported them here for his experiments. But Riley continued to think and answered that it was clear that they were all residents of Tanya, so they needed to continue comparing facts to understand at least something. A girl with joy in her eyes began to fly up to all the guys, asking what they were all doing and happily saying that the master had opened a rift in space and time, so everyone should prepare for battle. Two guys looked at the little fairy flying next to them with incomprehension. The man looked closely at the heroine, asking with surprise who she was and hearing in response from her that her name was Izel, and she was the guardian fairy of this place, so it was better not to argue with her if someone did not want to get hurt. Carl approached the fairy with displeasure, asking if she was the one who brought them here. But Izel did not want to explain anything. Starting to take out the sword, the hero was unhappy that she had kidnapped them and was not explaining anything, so he decided to make her talk. Izel sighed and looked down, asking Carl to stop doing stupid things if he wanted to live. Gritting his teeth and revealing his strength, the guy held the sword with displeasure, shouting that he was too impudent for such a small fry. Izel began to smile, asking the hero if this was his courage or stupidity. Carl, running toward the fairy, decided to teach her manners. Looking ahead in surprise, the hero froze in a daze. Carl's head lay on the ground in blood, separate from his body. The system window showed that the guy was overexcited and committed suicide. Deepal looked at the hero in fear, listening to what the fairy answered, that she warned. The man opened his mouth wide in fear, hearing that Izel answered her to listen. With wild eyes, the fairy looked at all the guys, answering that they should not try to raise a hand against her, since they would end up the same way, and for her it was just self-defense. Standing on the territory, all the people ran in panic and did not believe that the hero was now dead. Izel looked away in surprise, seeing a system window in front of her, which said that the group was formed and now it was necessary to transfer the heroes to free slots. Looking up, the fairy understood with pleasure that the master decided to start. Looking around at all the people, Izel asked everyone to get ready. Being near the door, the fairy loudly shouted for the rift to open. The door began to slowly open. A portal appeared. Deepal looked at this in fear, not knowing what to do. With pleasure and a smile on her face, Izel pointed her finger at the portal, answering the people to go so that they would not repeat the fate of this mercenary. Someone stood next to the fairy, starting to call her. Han answered Izel with displeasure to ask the master to give them weapons so that they could climb to the top of the tower, since they are 1-star and they do not even have anything basic. Jenna looked at the guy with incomprehension, wondering what he was talking about and what tower he was talking about. Izel thoughtfully looked at Carl's dead body, realizing that Han was right after all. Starting to write something on the keyboard, the fairy asked the master if it was possible to give the heroes equipment. Riley looked at the guy with fear and surprise, asking him if he knew anything about this place. Han calmly answered that he had not been here for a very long time. Everyone looked at the system windows, which said that everyone was given a sword and a bow. Looking closely at Han, Jenna began to understand that she needed to prepare very well. Pointing to the house, the hero shouted for everyone to go to the arsenal and take weapons, since they would soon begin. All the people looked after Han, asking what kind of battle it would be and what beginning everyone was talking about. Panic began in the area. Everyone was shouting that they could not fight anyone. There were many weapons in the arsenal. people began to take different equipment. A few seconds later, everyone came out of the arsenal with a full set. Izel, with a smile on her face, was next to the portal and pointing her finger at it, shouting for the group to go forward. Someone's hand touched the portal. The heroes, afraid to go there, looked at it in surprise and heard the fairy shouting at them to go faster. Jenna looked in surprise as Han took a weak shield, deciding to team up with the guy. Approaching the hero, the girl looked at the guy, starting to ask him if he knew what was behind those gates and why they all needed weapons. Han sighed in displeasure and looked at the floor, saying that it was too many questions. But they were all going to the arena to kill enemies, and the rest was not up to them. The heroes began to look at the system window, which said that one woman had already left their world. A few seconds later, the system window showed that almost everyone in the group of people had died. Han looked at this, answering that he did not expect anything else from one's stars. Izel looked at the message with displeasure, which said that one group had been destroyed. Han was surprised that it happened so quickly. Starting to get angry, the fairy heard the master asking the remaining heroes to move to free slots. Han understood that it was their turn, and the girl meanwhile was thinking why no one had returned from the portal. One of the men approached Izel in fear, asking him to feel sorry for him, since arthritis had broken out. Jenna noticed how calm Han was. Taking the man by the clothes, the heroine shouted that they needed to go and unite in order to survive. As they went into the portal, the guys heard the fairy shouting to everyone that they could handle it. Their feet were standing on the new ground. Jenna and the others looked around in surprise. Starting to look around, a group of people wondered where they were. There was something written on the wall at the top of the building. The door showed that this was the first floor of the main dungeon. Han looked ahead confidently, seeing that the system window said that the gate was opening and they needed to get ready. So he began to shout to the guys not to panic. The light became brighter, transferring the guys to a new world. Grass, a calm, peaceful sky. A group of people looked around in fear, seeing that they were in a field. The heroes asked with confusion where they were. Goblins began to run at the guys. Their levels were at the top, and the system window showed that the guys needed to destroy their enemies. Looking closely at the monsters, Han shouted for all the guys to gather, because if they do not fight, they will die. Seeing how the heroes ran back in fear, the guy did not know what to say to this. Jenna screamed loudly, and looking to the side asked where the old man went. The system window showed that Jenna was experiencing fear, so all the characteristics were reduced by 30%. The man continued to run quickly, loudly screaming that 3 guys began to quickly run back. The system window showed that the heroes were experiencing fear, so all the characteristics were reduced by 30%. Jenna looked away in fear, seeing how the guys crashed into the wall. With incomprehension, the heroes saw how they were standing near the wall, and they could not get out of this place. The man, knocking on the shield, discontentedly asked to let him out. Looking back, Han mockingly called everyone pathetic cowards. Jenna looked at the guy in fear, starting to confidently look at Han. The girl asked him if they would be able to get out if they killed all these goblins. Looking forward, Han began to tell the girl that he would go into close combat, and she would shoot back. Looking at the hero, Jenna asked what would happen to the rest of the group. Looking forward confidently, Han asked the girl not to think about it, since they were of no use. The goblins began to open their mouths wide. The monsters were quickly approaching the heroes. Running confidently forward, Han began to understand that he had never held a shield and sword in his hand. The monsters jumped on the main character, trying to kill him. Looking at the goblins, the guy answered that his name was Han. Starting to fight the goblins, the guy and Jenna tried to defend themselves, or get away from the monsters' attack. The main character knew that he had gotten into a game that depended only on luck. The door that opened the portal was tightly closed. The game Choose Me was loading on the phone. A huge number of people played it. The goal of this game was to reach the 100th floor of the tower. Players began to create items to improve and strengthen the heroes, and then worked out tactics to pass each stage. Until yesterday, Han was an ordinary person playing this game. Sitting on the couch, the hero held the phone in his hand and looked at the new event in the game, which was called the Paranormal Dungeon. Looking closely at the phone, Han realized that the maximum rank in this game is 7 stars, and the guy has bad luck. Han opened thousands of cards, but never got 7 stars, despite the fact that everyone already has them. Thinking, the hero realized that this game is different from its peers, and it's rather harsh rules, and all the heroes have only one life. An important warning appeared. Holding the phone tightly in his hands, the hero did not understand why his players were afraid, seeing that each of them was experiencing fear. With a calm face looking at the game, Han saw how his fighter was experiencing fear. Some boss of level 999 in the game began to kill Han's players. Looking at the phone with incomprehension, the hero began to think that this was just some kind of system error. Watching the enemy with level 999, Han realized that his players died before he saw anything. A monster quickly jumped out of the phone, shouting to the guy that he found it. Han looked up in fear, not understanding what was happening, because the game had just ended. Darkness fell. The system window told the guy to create his account. A message came out of the darkness for Han to choose a name. A few seconds later, Han had already chosen a nickname in the game. Without pressing anything, the guy saw how the game worked for him. One of the system windows welcomed the guy into the game. Suddenly, a message appeared that asked Han if he would start training, since after it, the hero would be able to receive a reward. The looked into the distance in fear. Standing with a sword in his hands, Han looked away in confusion. Listening to the system window answer that in an unremarkable town there lived a guy named Han. Tanya is an area where people live together with other slaves. Showing the city's domain, the system window responded that an unknown enemy had attacked these peaceful lands, so the hero now needed to climb to the top of the tower if he wanted to. The hand was holding the corner of the wall. Han looked into the distance with a frightened face. A system window was shown in front of the hero, telling him to destroy the goblins that had invaded the city. With wild fear, the guy could not believe it, thinking that this was not real. The guy began to watch as the goblin jumped on him and began to understand that he did not have time to figure it out. Holding the sword, the guy gritting his teeth swung the weapon. Confidently looking forward, the hero fought the monsters. With fatigue, the hero continued to grit his teeth, closing his eyes. Attacking the goblins, the guy swung his swords one after another. Screaming loudly, the hero began to quickly swing his weapon at the monsters. The guy could not come to terms with the fact that he personally killed another creature. Starting to leave tiredly, Han saw that the system window showed that the task was completed. The guy looked into the distance, surprised by the look. Seeing that he was standing in the square, the guy began to understand that he was in the game Choose Me. Opening his mouth wide, the hero shouted, asking what was happening. Beginning to see the system window at the top, which showed the hero to summon new players in the main menu. A door began to open in front of the guy, from which a bright light was burning. In one of the buildings, the silhouette of a new player appeared, whom Han had summoned. Looking into the distance with incomprehension, the hero began to understand that she had been summoned. Looking at Han, Monica began to ask the guy who he was, and whether he had summoned her. Heading towards the hero, Monica answered that she was a knight. After all this, the guys began to fight in the dungeon. Unlike Han, who had never held a sword in his hands before, the girl easily dealt with the goblins. The tired heroes began to watch the system window, which showed that the task was completed. Han looked at each other's characteristics, realizing that they had a big difference, since Monica had 3 stars more. After a while, a system window began to appear for Han, which told him to click on Synthesis. This is a way to strengthen the heroes. Gritting his teeth, the hero understood with displeasure that he was finished. Izzle began to fly around Han, who pointed to the door and shouted at him to quickly climb in while the master was waiting for him. The guy looked up in confusion. Looking at the fairy, the hero loudly asked her if her name was Izzle. The girl looked at the player in surprise, asking him how he knew her. Han, standing near the fairy, answered his name, but from the face of the heroine, looking at the player's cards, it was clear that there was no such name. The heroine looked at the card with displeasure and shouted that he didn't look like a player at all. Han calmly asked to return him home, answering that he was Han from Seoul, not from Tanya. The fairy looked at the guy with a displeased face, having learned that he was from the earth. Starting to fly up, the heroine shouted with displeasure that he was going to go crazy since it couldn't be possible. Starting to argue, Han shouted to Izel that he wouldn't go there since he would die there. Without listening to anyone, the fairy sent the guy out the door, shouting at him to get inside. Monica, standing next to the guy, answered that he entered very noisily. His hands began to absorb magic. Han, looking at his body with fear, answered that it all began. Synthesis is when one of the heroes rushes as a sacrifice to strengthen the other. One of the heroes is absorbed by the other. Looking away with displeasure, the hero understood that Monica had 4 stars, and he had 1, so no normal player would sacrifice the heroine for him. The knight stood quietly to the side, closing her eyes and lowering her head. Gritting his teeth, the hero closed his eyes in displeasure, realizing that this was the end and he would now be absorbed into the synthesis. A few seconds later, the hero looked in surprise at the system window, which said that the synthesis was complete. The knight began to evaporate in a bright light, hearing Han ask her why she was disappearing. Lowering her head, the girl calmly answered that this was her destiny and that a guy had been chosen. Smiling for the last time, Monica wished the hero good luck. A few seconds later, the guy was left standing completely alone. Looking forward, the hero could not understand what was happening. Grisha opened his mouth wide, starting to scream loudly. Han, fighting with Jenna, shouted at the people not to be distracted and fight, since the monsters would catch up with them if they ran away. Fighting monsters, the guy gritting his teeth understood that he survived. Confidently killing goblins, the hero understood that synthesis is produced by digesting heroes, and it is tedious to choose the one you want to merge, and then you need to drag. Looking away, Han discontentedly understood that they were lucky that the master is so stupid, but the game is a garbage dump. Jenna, running next to the guy, shouted that she killed one, but the second is not all. A few seconds later, the goblin's mouth bit Han's shoulder. With a dissatisfied face, the hero looked away, and gritting his teeth, understood that he did not know how he ended up inside this game, but one thing was clear for sure, that Han was summoned by a 1-star hero. The shield with all its strength began to pass over the goblin. Remembering the monster, the hero understood that this monster of level 999 looked into his eyes and laughed. Killing monsters, the hero understood that it could not be a coincidence, and that monster transferred him to this place. Seeing the monster in front of him, the guy began to understand that he messed with the wrong person. Jenna ran to the wounded guy sitting in fear. Despite the girl, the guy answered that it would heal when they returned. Sitting on the field and holding the wound with his hand, the hero knew that players almost do not directly control the fight, because the combat AI automatically conducts battles. And even so, the game gained 1 million downloads for one simple reason. Seeing the eye in the sky, Han understood that in this game, there is an opportunity to observe this world like a god. Laughing, the guy looked up and asked the sky if he was having fun there. Starting to slowly get up, Han realized that he himself was exactly the same player, where he controlled the creation of items, tactics, pumping heroes. Looking to the side, the guy understood that the master should see how he gets to the end. The system window showed that this floor had been completed. After a while, the rewards for this battle appeared. The card showed the most valuable player, Han. A huge number of people were drawn on the card, and next to them was the inscription that they all died in battle. Han and Jen's card was still burning, which meant that they were alive. Starting to train, the guy knew that he had come to terms with what was happening. Since whining is for losers, and he should not give up. Developing his running, the hero understood that this is the world of the game, and he ended up in it as a 1-star hero. Shouting loudly to the side, Han knew that there are only 2 types of death here. In battle or during synthesis, 1-stars have no chance and are useless. Continuing to run, the hero knew that weak characteristics and slow pumping are of no use to anyone, and such people will simply be wasted. Gritting his teeth, Han looked into the distance, thinking that he had to become stronger in order to survive and take revenge, and then return home. As he continued running, Han realized that he didn't know how things would play out, but if he didn't adapt, he was finished and would be eaten if no one accepted the rules of the game. As he pumped up his body, the guy realized that he had to strengthen not only his physical fitness, but also his spirit, since his chances of survival would be reduced if he couldn't control his emotions. As he gained experience with the stuffed animals, Han realized that he was used to it, because he grew up without anyone to take care of him. Despite his fatigue, the guy started doing push-ups. Watching the guy, Jenna asked him with confusion what he was doing. Seeing how rudely Han answered her, the girl said that she was just looking for him. A few seconds later, Jenna looked at him silently. Starting to pick up the bow, the heroine answered the guy that she had been thinking all night about what to do next. Shooting a bow, Jenna said that her father was a hunter and taught her archery. Swinging arrows, the heroine replied that she did not think that anything would change if she just sat and cried. The arrow confidently pierced the scarecrow's head. Wiping his face, Han asked the girl how good she was with a bow. His gaze looked askance at the heroine. Looking at how the heroine shot a bow, Han understood that she had received 4 points in characteristics yesterday. And despite the fact that she was weaker than him in this, she had skill, so Jenna had no problems killing goblins in her first battle. Looking at the heroine, the guy understood that she quickly recovered from the death of others, and at the same time knew how to set clear goals, so he agreed to help her. The hand was extended. Jenna, with a smile on her face, extended her hand to the guy, answering that her father said that having connections is a very important part of life. In this case, he was right. The hero looked at his hand out of the corner of his eye. Having extended his hand to the girl in exchange, the system window responded that the two heroes had received a relationship bonus. Suddenly, the hero began to look around, loudly calling Izel. Having flown in displeasure, the fairy shouted that she was busy. Looking angrily at the guy, Izel answered that she would not answer the guy's questions, and if he needed something, he had to go up to the tower. With surprise, the heroine heard Han asking her about the fact that only he could see pop-up windows. Looking away, the heroine waved off the question, answering that she did not understand what you were talking about. Han looked at the fairy and said that she was level 257. Looking askance at Izel, the guy began to understand that everything was clear from her reaction, and that only he could see the system messages addressed to the master. With interest, the hero began to ask Izel what would happen if the master quit the game. Thinking, Han began to understand that the synthesis of him and Monica was a pretty serious mistake, since he drained a 4-star player and wasted such a successful character by clicking on him. The hero knew that the account had a strong attachment to the phone, and it would not be possible to start over, and also the last time the master entered the game, only a week later. With interest, the hero approached the fairy closer, asking her if the flow of time here differs from the earthly one. But Izel said discontentedly that she would no longer answer anything. With a smile on his face, the hero looked at Izel, realizing that the flow of time here is different. Looking at the dissatisfied Izel, the hero understood that she could not do anything to him, since interference is allowed only when subordinating to the master or for self-defense. So in this way, he will be able to learn most of the rules of this world, or Han will end. The main character, standing next to Jenna, began to answer that they need to go through 100 floors of the tower. Looking at the girl, the guy waved his hands, answering that the creature called the Master gives them orders through Izel, and they must carry out these tasks. But with all this, they will be able to get out if they reach the top, so they need to train a lot to become much stronger. Approaching the guy, the heroine asked about the fact that they will be only 2, to which Han replied that the master can call other heroes, so they are unlikely to be alone. Han knew that now every decision must be made carefully. Standing in the square, the guy understood that their lives still remain in the hands of the master. After a whole day of training on such a huge territory, the guy learned another interesting ability of this world. Being in the house, Han understood that all the essentials and food are updated every day, and you can also get other things. And for this, it is enough to invent it, and it will appear by the fireplace or in the closet. But with all this, with game items, weapons, or money, this will not work. As he continued to train and gain experience, Han realized that the results of training were also different, as he was now learning mechanics that he had no idea about when he played himself. For example, among the 1-stars, there were more talented ones. Looking away, the guy realized that their trait was hard work, and despite the fact that training did not raise the characteristics or level, they helped to receive and develop new skills. Seeing battles, the master would sort the heroes by 3 criteria. The first was fortitude. since the master did not need heroes who tended to panic on the battlefield. Remembering Monica, the second criterion was skills, since high-ranking heroes were already summoned with skills, and 1 stars required hard work to reveal them. Continuing to run, Han realized that the third criterion would be physical training, which was the last point that the guy was working on. On the 3rd day of training, the master entered the game. Looking into the distance, Han answered Jenna, who was walking towards him. To get ready, since the master was already here, the hero understood that he had received 2 skills, and for now, this was the maximum. Standing in the square, the guys saw a system window which said that the master was starting a call. Looking at this, Han understood that he was calling heroes, and there should be 5 people in the group, so 3 more would come. A few seconds later, 3 heroes appeared on the territory. Leaving for the arsenal, Jenna shouted at the guys to get ready for battle, since they would soon begin the battle. Izel, standing near the rift, began to shout for it to open. Han and Jenna confidently began to take weapons, since there was little time. Dissatisfiedly walking forward, Han watched as Jenna pulled them into the portal, and understood that there were no weapons for new players, because they were left with the dead heroes. Toby looked back at the girl with displeasure, asking her if she was also in on it. Han entered the portal, telling the guys that they would soon understand everything themselves. Leaving the disgruntled guys in place, Han shouted at the girl not to think about it, since it was no longer their business. A few seconds later, the players were sent into the portal with the help of Izel. The fairy shouted at them to start listening so that she would not hurt them. The door began to close. With a smile on her face, Izel looked at the guys one last time, telling everyone to have fun. A group of people stood in the shield, seeing the system window, which said that they were on the 2nd floor. Confidently looking at Jenna, Han, not noticing the frightened people, asked the girl if she was ready. Evil animals began to walk around the territory, which began to approach the guys. 3 new guys with tears and fear in their eyes wondered what it was. Han looked at them with displeasure. Looking at Jenna, it was clear from the system window that she was also experiencing fear, which is why her characteristics were lowered by 30%. Having hit the heroine with his shield with all his might, the guy asked her if she had eaten enough porridge. Looking at the dissatisfied and angry Jenna, Han replied that 2 goblins were on her, and he would deal with the wolves himself. The protagonist looked at the newcomers out of the corner of his eye, realizing that he would be of no use to them. The wolves quickly attacked the guy. The mouth began to open wide. Opening his mouth wide, the hero quickly ran at the wolves, screaming loudly. The sword plunged into the wolf's mouth, passing through the beast's muzzle. Looking up with displeasure, Han understood that the weapon was terrible, and 1 blow was not enough. His hand began to spin. Swinging the weapon in different directions at the wolves, Han looked into the distance, realizing that this would be enough for him. After a while, the sword killed the last wolf, cutting off its head. The looked away with anger. With quick movements, Han put his shield in the mouth of the wolf, who wanted to attack the hero. Han looked at the monster with displeasure, gritting his teeth. On the other side, a new wolf jumped on the hero, trying to attack. Filled with strength, Han quickly ran at the wolf, swinging his weapon. With the help of a sword strike, blood began to flow all over the territory. The hero looked forward with displeasure, gritting his teeth. Looking into the distance, the hero asked about what was going on with the goblins. All the monsters had weapons. Approaching the goblins, the guy asked the girl in surprise how many times she shot them. The heroes looked tiredly at the monsters, realizing that they were all already dead. The heroes stood in a stream of power, seeing a system window above, which said that the floor was protected. Han and Jenna began to leave, and the 3 heroes calmly followed them. The ground began to shake. Jenna asked in fear what was happening, to which Han replied that they had captured the 2nd floor and were now going up to the 3rd. The hero watched the 3 players, realizing that the master would always rise. Looking into the distance, Han began to think about what would happen next and whether they would immediately clear the 3rd floor. Exhaling, Han noticed the system window, which showed that the master had left the game. Izel was pulling herself up, loudly shouting that she was very tired. Turning to the portal, Han began to understand that they were passing one floor per day, and if time was 3 times faster here, then the master would return in 3 days. Putting the shield in the arsenal, the hero began to understand that his intelligence had decreased by 1, but strength had increased by 2 points. Character had increased by 4, and the pumping speed had also improved. This meant that Han had become stronger. The hero, not noticing how the 3 guys were yelling at Jenna, thought that the master was in no hurry, because they would have had problems if they constantly went straight up. Looking at the players, the guy realized that 1-star heroes were ordinary people who had never been to war and had never fought. Remembering Carl, the hero understood why they were considered expendable. Starting to think about Monica and her battles, Han realized that high-ranking heroes do not hesitate in battle, unlike 1-star ones who panic. Looking at Jenna, the hero thought that Monica probably knew something. The heroine stood next to the guy, offering him to try to explain everything to the guys. Han looked at Jenna with displeasure, asking her why waste time on this. The heroine looked at the guys, realizing that if they explained everything, the heroes could understand everything and then become their allies. The main character watched the trio, answering that they would soon die, so he would see how everything goes further. Looking at the guys, the hero understood that they were simply synthesizing, so he began to answer them not to freeze. Since they would, the guy's gaze was carefully looking at the girl. As he left, Han answered Jenna that he was not going to waste his time on her. Toby grabbed the guy's clothes tightly. With quick movements, Han turned over and punched the hero in the face. Looking down at Toby, the guy answered that they were hiding behind their backs while they fought. Looking out of the corner of his eye at Jenna, Han asked the girl if she was happy now. The next day, the guys continued training. Starting to fight with the Scarecrow, Han understood that after physical training, weapons training began. It was difficult to call it any special training, since the hero simply waved a wooden sword, and Jenna shot a bow. The trio did not show up for training. They behaved as if they had found a way out of this place. Jenna confidently began to shoot a bow. The guy swung his sword with quick movements. Gritting his teeth, the hero began to look at his leg, which had an arrow in it. Frightened, Jenna ran up to the guy, asking if she was okay. The wound began to heal slowly, and the guy answered that this place was different from the real world, so everything was restored quickly. Continuing to fight, the hero shouted for everyone to start. Han understood that pain was not a problem for him because it meant that he was still alive. Arrows began to quickly pierce the shield. The system window showed that the master was back in the game. Izel looked at all the guys, loudly shouting for them to gather in the square. Jenna looked ahead with confidence and began to warm up, answering that her hands were itchy after training. Han was surprised that the girl was getting used to the new world so quickly. The guys began to look at the fairy with displeasure, asking to return them home. The fairy began to slowly lose her temper. Quickly throwing the heroes up, Izel shouted at them that they were annoying her. Han and Jenna stood aside, watching the fairy deal with the 3 guys. The beaten heroes stood quietly, listening to Izel shouting at them to go inside. The system window showed that the 3rd floor had begun. New monsters were already ready for battle. Taking a stance, Han confidently told the girl that their strength and skills had improved, and now they should act like in training. A few seconds later, the guy quickly ran at the goblins, slowly killing everyone. Standing together with the girl and looking at each other, the hero replied that it was very boring. Jenna began to look at the 3 with displeasure, answering that they were just standing again. Looking up, Han saw advice, which said to send the disobedient fighters for a new passage. Jenna looked at Han, realizing that it was too early for them to relax. The heroes appeared on the 1st floor again. Looking around, Jenna realized that everything was not so bad. Looking at the monsters, the guys realized that they did not change. Jenna held a bow with a smile on her face and killed the last monsters. Looking up, Han again saw that the master wanted to go through the 1st floor. The girl and the hero went through the floors one by one, killing all the monsters and receiving rewards for this. Barely standing on her feet, Jenna looked at the guy with displeasure, hoping that they would not be sent to fight again. After a while, the heroes came out of the rift. Jenna walked ahead with Han, answering that she was tired of protecting them. Han calmly walked forward, saying that the master did not want to mess with insects. In the middle, a building confidently stood. The doors opened and the system window responded that the synthesis process had been launched. The three heroes looked at this with incomprehension, wondering what it was. Han looked at the guys, seeing that the system window asked the master to drag the heroes to sacrifice some. Watching the players, Han realized that they never took advantage of the chance. The map showed all the places of the game where the players were at different times of the day. Open gates appear in front of us. The protagonist, looking menacingly ahead, thinks that they had a chance, maybe even more than one. Imagining the game in his head, he continues to think that although most of the little things are not shown on the screen, the master still has a general understanding of what is happening in the game. He knows about the achievements of the heroes, sees who is fighting, who is just standing aside. Stretching out her hand, she said that now let them go to the synthesis room, to which Han replied that everything is fine, nothing will happen to her. The man behind him, stretching out his hand, asked what will happen if they go there, to which Han replied that he will get what he deserves. A second later, the man, opening his mouth wide, screamed that he was dragged here against his will. The protagonist, turning around, replied that no one cares about his opinion, and the fairy added that for the first time she agreed with his words. Looking at the frightened man, Han continued to say that he thought he would always hide behind others' backs. He doesn't know how to fight. But it was enough to at least try. The fairy added that everyone was already tired of messing with them, so let him climb inside. Suddenly, the gate slammed shut. A system message appeared about the start of synthesis. The man, opening his mouth in fear, screamed to be let out. How can they do this? Suddenly, the room was covered in blue fire. After a while, the girl with red hair came out of there. The synthesis was complete. Looking ahead, she asked what happened because that man just evaporated. The protagonist, looking at her, replied that they get rid of useless heroes here. Now it's his turn. Looking at the guys behind him, he asked interestingly, which of them will get to learn it? Then the fairy, stretching out her finger, shouted for them to go. The guy looked ahead in fear, turning pale. The protagonist stood in place, lowering his head. Then the guy going inside laughed and shouted that they were sending him home. That's right, he will finally return. To which Han, lowering his head, replied that he can believe in what he wants. After a while, a system message appeared that the synthesis was complete, and the player evaporated in a bright light. The protagonist also completed the synthesis. He increased his level and received the skill of cold-bloodedness.